Okay, for this video we're going to tie a foam salmon fly. It's a salmon fly pattern that I like to fish when the salmon flies are hatching. Pretty big fly, pretty bushy, and floats really well, makes a little noise when it hits the water, which is something that I like when I'm trying to catch trout on salmon flies. So, so here we go, the foam salmon fly. First thing, I'm going to get my thread attached to the hook and work it to the back here. Notice I tie my thread quite a ways down the bend of this hook. The hook that we're using is a size 8 curved stonefly hook, and I actually will tie this sometimes in a size 6 and even a size 4. I like to tie them really large. So size 8 curved stonefly hook. Okay, next step is I'm going to tie in the, the foam here, and I like to use a pretty long strip of foam, mainly because one of the things I do is I tie the foam in. You notice I kind of used about half of the, I tied it in about halfway through the length of this foam. It's about a little less than a 1/4 inch wide, the foam is, and it's 2 millimeter black foam. So once I get it tied in, then I'm going to wrap up towards the front of the fly. Notice I'm making some consecutive wraps up towards the front. And then on my way back, same thing. Just trying to get this foam kind of fastened down a little bit. And then once I feel like I've got it on there, then I'm just going to make some wraps front and back, fastening this down a little bit. Don't want to tighten it down too much because I like to use that foam to create myself a little bit of body. Give this fly some body, make it nice and thick. So next thing we're going to use, I'm going to use a little bit of orange antron yarn. A little bit of orange yarn. I like to use this stuff. Sometimes I'll use a dubbing instead, but we're going to use this orange antron yarn today. And tie that in, same sort of thing. I'm going to just tie it in and then wrap forward. Once I get up there, then I just wrap it back. Okay. Now I use this orange antron yarn. I'm going to wrap that antron yarn forward. And don't pull too hard. I'm not going to get too tight of wraps. I'm just going to wrap somewhat gently as I work forward. Gives this fly a nice big thick body. And when I get up here towards the front, I'm just going to wrap a little bit up towards almost all the way to the eye. Now I'm going to use my thread. I like to use my thread. I just bring it forward like this. Just kind of, it gives that hook a little bit of a black thread. That black thread just kind of gives it maybe the appearance of the segments of the body of the salmon fly. So try to make my wraps somewhat similarly spaced apart until I get up towards the front here. Whoops, lost grip on that. And I just want to get my wrap up towards the front and tie that off. So that may have looked like a little bit of wasted space there, but what I do is I bring that up to the front, because in our next step we're going to tie this foam off, and then we're going to be tying in some elk hair. And I like to have a little bit of body here, because something that the elk hair will cinch down to rather than just the steel of the hook, because a lot of times that does not end up being quite as successful. So I fold my foam over the top of the fly. Looks like I had just the right amount, because we're not going to have to snip anything. I'm just going to tie that off and use some nice tight wraps to kind of fasten that down a little bit. Just kind of have a little black foam fold over there. Okay, now that we've got the back pulled over, I'm going to cut some elk hair. I'm going to tie in this elk hair. In the back, I use a pretty good pinch of elk hair, because like I said before, this is a pretty big fly, and this is a fly that I want to make a little bit of noise as it hits the water. So I cut my elk hair out, and there's a little bit of some of the fuzzies. I'm going to pull those out, get those pulled off of there. So when I go to put this in the hair stacker, it's just the good elk hair fibers that I want. Okay. All right. Got a pretty good clump of elk hair. I like to have the elk hair stick back about to where the end of the hook is, right about there. Once I have it where I want it, hold it down with my left hand and get a couple of soft wraps up to about where I intend to fasten it down. That might be a little too close to the eyelet. No, that's not. It looks pretty good. Soft wraps up to about where I want it, and then I pull pretty tight. You can see that elk hair flare a little bit, and then I'm going to work back on the fly, tying towards the back. And then after I get it tied towards the back, it's going to come forward, cover up all that thread, and there, nice and tight. Got a couple of pieces of elk hair there that weren't quite long enough, it looks like. See, I've got a loop there. That was from one of my soft wraps, which doesn't usually become an issue because we're going to fix that here in a second. So then I clean that up in the front. Try to clean it up as best I can. And bring some thread around to the front just to help clean it up a little bit. There we go. All right. Now my next step is going to be to tie in some hackle. I'm going to tie in some hackle. I'm going to use a little bit of brown hackle today, and comes off of one of these. Sometimes I'll use a grizzly hackle, but for this one I'm going to use a brown hackle. And actually, I don't like to use ones the hackle fly that has that flares really. I like to use a size that's a size smaller than what you would anticipate using for a hook this size. But I'm going to tie my hackle in there. Okay. Once I've got it tied in, now I'm going to use a little bit of dubbing up there on the front. So I'm going to use just a little bit of orange dubbing, same color as the yarn that I used. And what I like to use the dubbing for is it just gives that head of the fly a little bit of a softer base, so that the hackle will sink into it a little bit better and fasten a little bit better to the fly. So I'm going to dub in some orange dubbing, wrap the dubbing right up to the eye of this hook, and then tie it off. Okay, now the last step, we're just going to bring this hackle and I'm going to wrap it forward. Notice it is smaller hackle. I don't like to use the larger hackle. I like to have a little bit smaller, just something wrap right up to the front. Once I get it on the front, then I'm just going to tie that off. A couple of quick wraps there. And snip my hackle. Now the last step is I'm going to whip finish this fly. Pull back all of the hackle so my whip finish doesn't, I had one in there, so the whip finish doesn't grab it, and get a number of good whip finish wraps on there. There we go. All right, looks like I got a couple of flyers underneath, so I'm going to take this out of the vise and trim it up. But that's the foam salmon fly. I just like to get a foam back. Sometimes I'll actually tie it in with some rubber legs too, but I've noticed with this fly it's just big enough. It's going to float and be buggy enough looking. So yeah, I'm going to snip some of those just to clean that fly up. But so there it is.